moderated by Doug Robinson, the Executive Director of the National Association of Chief Information Officers. Doug has been, and NASCIO have been great partners to the IGES Institute, working on many different initiatives. Most recently, you heard this week about the procurement innovation project we've been working on together. We're very excited about being able to hear from NASCIO on just a variety of different things that go on around the country. And obviously, as a technology industry constituency, the thoughts of CIOs on their strategies and the programs they're working on are of paramount interest. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over now to Doug Robinson. Please join me in welcoming Doug in the panel.
Thank you, Steve, and again, pleasure to be back, and greetings from the state CIO community. I want to welcome our two contestants today to State CIO Jeopardy. Tony and Jim. The first category is words that end in T-I-O-N, because that's the world of state CIOs, as it is for many CIOs. Consolidation, integration, standardization, virtualization. You can't have more than a 2-minute conversation with a state CIO without hearing lots of words that end in T-I-O-N, so you'll hear that this morning. What I'm going to do, just in terms of the format this morning, is introduce our two contestants, our two guest speakers here. We've got a deck that contains a lot of interesting data, and so the format is I'm going to do the play-by-play, and they are going to provide some colored commentary and perspectives from each state. The addition to is we also have some of our interactive polling questions from our last couple of conferences, and I'm going to sprinkle those in to give you a sense of, non-scientifically anyway, what the kind of the voice of the state CIO community is around a couple of a few key topics. And we've got a lot of data. I suspect that we will not get through it all in the next hour or so, but we'll leave some time certainly at the end for some questions, and you will have the entire set of slides available to you through IGES and be able to look at those and follow up with any questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sit down and introduce our two speakers today, and we'll get going. So I invite you to kind of sit back and buckle your seatbelts, because it's going to be a fast and could be a bumpy ride. We'll see how it goes. We'll see. So again, our two state CIO speakers today are esteemed colleagues from the state of Pennsylvania and from Delaware. So to my immediate right, Tony Insinius, who's the CIO for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I think, again, you'll see different perspectives, and also one which is, I think, interesting given the state CIO transition, is Tony's been in his job a little over a year, although he's had a lot of state service as the CTO, and also a background with the Navy and DOD, but he has only been state CIO since December of 2012, correct. So he's a little over a year. And so he's one of our newer CIOs and joined the club. Since 2011, we've had 49 new CIOs out of our 55 members. Since 2012, 30. So I want you to think about that. I walk around in my head with a color-coded heat map. So my job as the executive director is make new friends fast. So that's our optimal skill because of that kind of transition. So that certainly is something that has an impact on the market and state government. To my far right is Mr. Jim Sills, and he is the Secretary of Technology and CIO in the state of Delaware. Now, Jim has, I think, just completed over 5 years of service. The state came out of the private sector, which many of your CIOs do at the state level in the financial services and banking industry. Both these gentlemen serve on committees within NASCIO, and Jim actually is a director on our executive committee, a member of our board. So again, these are our two panel experts, and we're going to run through a lot of data today on the state of the states and the CIO community. First thing is just get a quick recap from my perspective on the state CIO landscape. You've probably heard this over the past few days. We've certainly been talking about it. We've had a slow but certainly growing economic recovery in the states. State CIOs are still kind of focused on the operational and cost-saving model, but they're also bringing a kind of a lot of innovation. As we always like to say, there's a balancing act between living with the past. Predominant environment within state government is legacy systems. 75 to 80% or more of the spend in the environment is probably would be considered legacy. But the state's CIOs and certainly their agencies are looking to introduce innovation and transform the business processes. So we're seeing a lot of that going on. We'll talk about cyber certainly as one of our top topics. So I'll kind of defer that. We have certainly a growing trend in what I'll call just generally open government, open data, transparency, accountability, and many CIOs are proud of their effort in that and driving the governor's agenda. And as I mentioned, CIO transitions and those numbers certainly is something that impacts the ability to maintain maturity. I think you're going to have today represented two states that are very mature in a variety of business disciplines and capabilities and what they're doing. And so I think they're good examples of where states can go. And of course, we're dealing, as is the federal and state level, with transitions in the workforce, retirements, difficulty in recruitment, and everything else. So that's kind of the landscape. So let me bring up our first polling question here. We asked this at our annual conference, how would you characterize your IT budget this fiscal year? We ask this every year, and again, our state government audience, these are instant polls, so certainly non-scientific, I think give a good poll. So if you look at these answers, increased by 10% or more, flat, reduced, and also reduced by more than 10%. Let me start with Tony here. Tony, what's your response to that particular question from the Commonwealth?
It's actually a twofold answer to that, Doug. When I came to the Commonwealth in 2008, a year prior to the Great Recession, my office's budget was roughly around $70 million. Today, it's roughly around 45. Last year was the first year that we had a somewhat increase in our line item in the governor's budget. However, I caveat that employee benefits and salaries also increased. So at the end of the day, it was a zero-sum game, so I'm really flat. Mm-hmm. So from an operational perspective, I really didn't get any extra money. So that's kind of the situation that we're in. It's a lot better than losing money, but it's still doing more with less and less and less. So we're still struggling.
So you don't see yourself getting back to those 2007 and 8 levels?
Not in my lifetime.
Before your next retirement.
That's right. That's right.
What's your total IT spend in the Commonwealth?
Total from 47 agencies under the governor's jurisdiction is roughly $1 billion per year.
So $1 billion a year in Commonwealth. And so, Jim, your perspective on the budget situation and your spend?
Yeah, Doug, our spend has been relatively flat over the last 5 years. We've been pretty good with managing our budget and actually deploying some dollars through cost savings to some newer technology. So I feel really good about that. Our state budget from a spending perspective is about $700 million, and that includes everything, infrastructure, personnel, but also project spending.
Okay. So let's see what our state CIO said a few months ago, and again, perspective there was that almost half said it was a flat. So let me compare and contrast that to just 3 years ago, where over 40% said that they were in reductions of 10% or more. So we're seeing that evidence of a growing recovery. It's been certainly much slower. Total spend in the states has increased. For over 35 years, the total increase in all spending in states was almost 5% or more each year above the previous year. That flatlined and certainly went down during the recession, and we're now seeing that back up. So those historical trends are kind of inching back up. It's not at 5% yet, but that's generally been the trend if you look at the state budget. So we may not get back to pre-recession levels anytime soon in terms of the spend. We're certainly seeing states that are not in fiscal stress, and they're able to, of course, they all have to balance their budgets, so it's a little bit different.
And
So,
Doug,
yes.
just add one more thing to that. I mean, this is really the catalyst of how we think today from a CIO perspective. I mean, traditionally, we can no longer think traditionally from an IT perspective where we own data centers and own infrastructure and those type of things, because we just simply can't afford it. We can't afford the refresh every 4 or 5 years. We can't afford the maintenance on specific software. So we really have to think outside the box. And in state government, that's easier said than done. It takes a lot of prodding, it takes a lot of communication, but that's the direction we have to go. And if you're not going down that direction, you're really not going to be successful.
Good perspective, Tony. Thanks. So let's kind of set the stage here for a deeper discussion by talking about introducing some of our state CIO priorities and give you a quick background. Each year, we ask the state CIOs to rate and rank their individual priorities for the year, and then we homogenize that and aggregate it into the state CIO priority list. We've done this for a number of years, and so here's your 2014 list. And not surprisingly, cybersecurity up number 1 in 2014. Now, cyber has been on the list for the past 9 years, but it's kind of repositioned itself with a variety of, obviously, state impacts. Number 1 back in 2006, and it's kind of positioned itself in the middle, but it's back up to number 1 in 2014. A couple of comments just on some new items in there that have always been kind of at the cusp, but certainly only one real surprise from my perspective. Consolidation optimization had been number 1 for several years, and I think as states become more mature and move in that space, you're seeing that still a priority until an operational cost savings focus. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Project and portfolio management, interesting, not even in the top 15 in the last few years, but I think probably as a reflection of IT projects that have gone south, and the enterprise, as we titled it, the enterprise imperative on our recent report, the interest in really kind of looking at it from the CIO perspective, that needs to be an important business discipline, and project oversight and portfolio management is a lot more important. So, and again, you see the other items there. Mobile dropped a couple of spots, and cloud services moved up. So we'll touch on each of these in a little more detail, but I think I'll go back to Jim here and say, Jim, as you look at this top 10 list, maybe all of these are number 1 on your plate, but how does this resonate with you, and what do you recall in terms of your ranking in this area?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite lists. I actually have this on my desk. We're at the state of Delaware, we're working on all 10 of these really at the same time. I'm really focused on number 1, cybersecurity, and also number 5 at the moment. Our largest university had a breach in the summertime, and so our governor, our legislature, all of our cabinet officials are really focused on cybersecurity. So for the last 10 months or so, I've been meeting with all the various disciplines within my department all at the same time to make sure we're doing everything possible to protect the interest in the assets and the data of the state. So that's kind of my number 1 priority, and I'm really focused on it. Number 5, like I said earlier, we're focused on all 10 of these at the same time, but I really want to figure out a way to take it to the next level. And so Doug and Tony, we're really looking at creating an innovation lab, changing our funding models, and also focused on the IT workforce of the future. So even though those items are not on there, those are some of the other priorities that we have in my department.
Sure. Tony, your perspective, I know you've got a lot going on in cyber.
Yeah, as Doug mentioned before, I retired from a Navy active duty career, and as such, spent some time within DoD, within the Defense Information System Agency, and security is always number 1 there for obvious reasons. And that kind of mentality is carried with me since then into the state government. Back in 2008, I was shocked about how we were not doing the things we needed to do from a security perspective, from an application and security perspective. Since 2008, we've come a very, very long way, and I think we have a very mature security operations. So just to say that security has been always a priority with me, and it still is, and it always will be. We have a lot of very valuable data that hackers are willing to do just about anything to get their hands on, and we have to do everything in our power to protect that data that we can possibly do. It's being more proactive than reactive, because if you're reactive, then you're really going to be really catching up, and we're never going to really catch up to the hackers. I mean, they've got an advantage that that we can never have. I mean, it's a very low cost to them, where it's a very high cost for us. And if we can prevent even just one major data breach, it would have been all worth it. So.
Yeah, good. And we'll get into cyber here in a few moments, but you can see there's certainly not only investments that need to take place, a lot of maturity, but also a significant amount of passion about that from the state CIOs. And certainly what we've seen in 2012 to 13 is kind of what I've called the SCE, which is the South Carolina effect. So with governors now realizing that cybersecurity and even information technology has gone beyond interesting into important, and can be a political liability. We've seen a significant increase both in attention and investment, both in time and resources into cyber. So again, we'll talk a little bit more of that in the morning. So let's move on. Jim kind of mentioned this, is that we have our official top 10 list, and then we have our unofficial, what I call the CIO pain points list. So that's something we look at on a regular basis, and other than perhaps, they might have a bad back or a bum knee, but we're looking at other pain points. And one of those sets of questions we put before them, again, back at our conference in Philadelphia in the fall, and asked them just, off the top of their head, when they woke up, what was their top pain point. So I guess, Tony, when you look at this, with this list here, what's your top pain point?
My top, it's coming from again, DOD to state government. I mean, it's the IT procurement process within state. I was, it was tough in DOD with all the regulations and everything we needed to do to do an RFP. But when I got to the state, it was probably 100-fold more difficult. I kind of joke with most people to say that it was a lot easier to transfer money between the Army and the Navy than it is to transfer money between the public welfare and the Department of State within state government. And it's just one budget. It's the same budget. So that's really my pain point, trying to figure out how can we improve that process, because that's one thing that's out of my control, because it's the procurement law of Pennsylvania. I don't deal with that. It's a legislative thing. And that's why every time I get asked this question at NASCIO or any other conferences I go to, and vendors ask this question, I say, well, help us help you, because you have your lobbyists that can get the ears of the legislators to help fix this problem. And I understand the lobbyists have another motivation to get business, but they also help us help you and change this process, because it's very difficult and very frustrating.
Jim, back to you. Your pain point?
Yeah, my pain point is B, the IT workforce. Recently, we just analyzed all of the employees within my department that can actually retire now, within the next 2 years and the next 3 years. Let me just give you the statistics. 20% of our staff can retire right now, tomorrow. 30% can retire within the next 2 years, and 40% can actually retire within the next 3 years. And we have a shift. There's a rapid technology shift in terms of us moving to the cloud. And so we have a lot of subject matter experts that have been maintaining these legacy applications. And so I'm a little nervous about people potentially leaving today or tomorrow within the next 12 months, and we have not captured that knowledge of that application or that infrastructure, how it all works. And so that's something we've really been focused on in terms of documenting what people do and what things they actually support and how they support that application or whatever function is within my department.
Well, Jim wins that category for CIO Jeopardy this morning, and that was the collective wisdom of the crowd of our state CIOs at our conference, was the state IT workforce. And again, we've got some information at the tail end, and if we get to that, we'll be able to cover. Jim, I guess I'd go back to you we've seen a lot of innovation going on in the last couple of years around recruitment, retention, state CIOs are really trying to go to their HR and personnel folks and get some reforms done. But I know Delaware was, I think, not only the #1 state, the first state, but also the first state in terms of something that happened a few years ago. So what's going on with DTI and the civil service reforms in terms of what you've done with that staff? Because that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think there are 2 states in the United States. Our Department of Technology and Information, we're totally exempt. We're non-union, non-merit. And so we kind of operate our agency just like a private sector, very close to like a private sector company. We evaluate our employees every 6 months. We can, if there is a raise that is allocated to our department, we can give people up to 10%. So if the governor only gives us 1%, I can actually give certain employees up to 10%, who are some of our high performers. One trend that we're noticing within our state is a number of subject matter experts are starting to leave the respective other departments. And so now those departments are coming to us to say, can you help us support XYZ application? And it's really got us a little nervous, because we have our workforce that's potentially leaving, but also other people that have 20, 30 years in a respective agency are in the process of leaving out the door at the same time. So it's something that actually keeps me up at night a little bit. But I feel really good about some of the HR policies and programs that we've put in place in terms of training. We actually have about $500,000 a year allocated just to train our staff. So that is one retention tool that we use to keep everybody kind of up to speed on all the newer technology. So that helps us also.
You're dealing with
Yeah.
unions and civil service.
I mean,
It's tough.
Instead of the IT workforce, I would actually categorize what really is the pain point for me is the workforce process itself. Where 90% of the 2,100 plus IT employees in the Commonwealth are covered either by the union or civil service rules. And those are and the civil service process is very, very cumbersome when it comes to IT skill sets and reclassifications. So because IT changes so rapidly, it's really hard to keep that process up to date with the requirements. I mean, we have a very mature GIS organization within Pennsylvania, but we have no classification for GIS experts within the civil service communities. And we've been trying to fix that for the last 3 years, and it's been very, very difficult. So we hire generalists and say, okay, you want to be a GIS expert. That's how we go around it, but it's not the right way to do that. So we're, with a lot of things, and I don't know if we're going to touch about this later, about IT consolidation and procurement, we've got a huge, we awarded a huge contract to Unisys for outsourcing our compute services to the cloud. And with that, that's going to fundamentally change how the IT workforce is. I mean, we no longer are going to be needing system administrator, or not system administrators, but server administrators and storage administrators, and folks that are really doing the infrastructure piece of the work. So what are they going to do? Well, we need to really transform that workforce to something that we do need, is more vendor management, system analysts, those type of things. And that's kind of part of our IT workforce of the future. We've actually got our, organizations within my organization and agencies to collectively come up how we're going to do that, because it is a problem that we all have. I mean, it's 1B for me, but again, like I said, 1A was really the IT procurement process.
Lots of plain points. So as you can see, looking at these two lists, as I always like to say, particularly with the CIO priorities, the tagline to that is the tyranny of the or and the genius of the and. As you heard Jim say, they're doing all of them, and some of them they're all number one. So that kind of sets the stage. So we're going to dig in to a few topics in more depth and get some commentary on some of the stuff in the technology stack. And if we have some time, maybe talk a little bit about procurement. So let me move on to kind of the summary of our 2013 survey. And again, blatant product placement. If you want to download this at NASCIO.org, you can, and you'll get the full color copy, and you can get that complimentary for the NASCIO website, and it'll give you more details about again, the 12 topics that the state CIOs were surveyed on in 2013. We had extraordinary response rate. 54 out of our 55 members responded to that, so we've got some really good data and a host of questions inquiry. So this is kind of the summary of their responses and kind of an executive summary and a number of points, and we're going to touch on some of those, particularly around, again, consolidation, cloud, mobility, and a few others. So let me kind of move through this, and we'll talk a little bit about the first topic, which was cybersecurity. So we had a line of questions in the survey around cybersecurity, and we've kind of touched on that, but I wanted to give you the aggregate data, the voice of the state CIOs collectively, and then certainly talk about what experiences in both Delaware and Pennsylvania. No surprise, states are facing an increasing parade of threats, both internal, external, emerging technologies, the adoption of some of the consumer technologies, BYOD, file sharing, private cloud issues. And again, one of the areas that we probably should discuss is the fact that state chief information security officers, as well as CIOs, continue to be concerned about the growing threats posed by third-party contractors. If you look over the last couple of years, some of the major data breaches in states, particularly in the Medicaid and Health and Human Services area, were all essentially caused by contractors taking data at rest out of the state, or using it in a mobile, or having it on the USB and losing that data. So again, we need more discipline and more protocols and compliance around the third-party contractors and managed services within the state. So these gentlemen can certainly focus on that. So again, that's the quick background, but let's move into a couple of questions that we had. So one of the questions was to characterize the state of the cybersecurity program within their state, and we gave them a kind of a standard framework that we've been using. You can see 3/4 of them have that, they've got a cybersecurity framework. 90% of the states are actually using NIST in the NIST series as kind of a foundational piece, and they build on that with PCI and others, but that's kind of the approach. And you can see as you look down the list, some of the things that certainly NASCIO has recommended over the years about continuous vulnerability monitoring, education and training, and creating a culture. So again, these are something that both these folks have been working on. So I guess Tony, again, has noted this is certainly his #1 topic, and I guess I'd ask you to kind of give us a minute or so, characterize your perspective in terms of where you are in the Commonwealth
Sure.
with these.
I always say you're a product of your environment, and after spending 21 years in the military, I kind of still carry that with me. In the military, we don't do anything without process or policies. I'm a firm believer in adopting fundamental standards. NIST is really being the fundamental area from a security perspective. It's not only just security, but it's always also infrastructure and anything else associated with IT. Also looking at FISMA and making sure that our controls are in place to satisfy federal requirements, because a lot of our medical and welfare programs, IRS programs need to satisfy federal requirements as well. So why not start there? I also look to DoD. DoD fundamentally, in my opinion, has some of the stringent requirements from a security perspective. And you can go to the DISA website or the Field Security Officer's website and download the DISA STIGs, which are fantastic in my perspective in making sure to secure your environments. And they also have the gold disc. Obviously, I can't implement everything that they do because I'd get thrown out. But I do modify those requirements to fit the needs of the Commonwealth. So I'm very process-oriented, very believe highly that you need to have a fundamental document and guidance to manage your organization. And I also don't believe in reinventing the wheel. So.
Thanks, Tony. Jim, Delaware has actually, I know, been recognized nationally and by NASCIO and others for excellence in cybersecurity training and your program on awareness, too. So you might want to touch on that as you kind of look at the question on characterizing your environment.
Yeah, this is something I'm really pleased to report to you on. We've been recognized by the Department of Homeland Security a few times in terms of our efforts to conduct outreach and awareness with our state and local government, with our business partners, with our military, and our utilities. And we think it's critical that we have really good partnerships to actually help reduce the threat. And the other issue that we really are focused on is education. And so we require all of our state employees each year to take a cybersecurity computer-based training course that's online. And it's really helped us make this issue and make everybody aware of this particular issue. I have a very good chief security officer. She's involved in a lot of different programs all throughout the country. We've received funding from the Department of Homeland Security to do a lot of this, and so we're really focused on training our staff, training others within the state government to make sure they're aware of this issue and how they can protect their assets.
And that's a good point. The two things that I always think hold true for when it comes to cybersecurity and security in general. One, our people are our weakest link. And it's not a question of if, but when you're going to have a data breach. You need to have that kind of mentality and really work to try to mitigate that risk of when it's going to happen. Because no organization, I would submit, no organization has not been subject to some type of breach or some kind of incident vulnerability exploitation at one time or another.
Yeah, and they just don't know it. It's a good point, because that's what I tell state leaders and governors is, I said, you've already been breached. You've already had an incident. You just don't know it yet. You look at the data, 6 to 8 weeks is the normal timeline around state and local government for recognizing that they've been breached. So 6 to 8 weeks after the actual vulnerability is when they discover it. So that's been a pretty consistent track record for the last several years. So let's move on to the next question. Of course, we've got the opportunities. We asked them what they're doing, but there's always challenges and barriers. So this reflects a set of questions we used in 2012 with our chief security officers, and so we replicated that for the CIOs. So I will tell you, interesting enough, the number 1 and 2 positions were pretty close. With the security officers, lack of adequate funding was it got 80+%, so that was their major challenge, and that the increasing sophistication of threats was number 2, and then down the road here. So again, with the CIOs, their perspective is it's the sophistication and both the veracity of the threats that states are seeing, and certainly, as you can see, emerging technologies and other things are pretty part of it. So we have a little bit deeper information on some of our other reports, but again, I'm going to kick this back to Jim and get his perspective from Delaware on looking at these major challenges. Is it the money? Is it the people? Is it the threats? Obviously, it's a combination, but what's your concern there?
For me, specifically, it's really increasing sophistication of the threats. This is something that I really have been paying attention to in my role as state CIO for the last 12 months. We have some unbelievable tools that give us the number of attempted penetrations on a per-minute basis. And so we can run a report and actually see how many attempted penetrations and what countries it's actually coming from. And you would be amazed at the sophistication and the attempts that different countries are trying to do to our networks. And so I receive various reports, and I also look at, what are we doing to mitigate some of those potential threats, and also what are we doing to fix some of the vulnerabilities that have actually been identified. And so I actually have taken a really hands-on approach. I look at this data on a weekly basis, and then I meet with my staff on a monthly basis, but I have every single discipline we meet together. And then the prior 4 years, I used to just meet with the chief security officer. Then sometimes I would just meet with the telecom people, and sometimes I would just meet with the email team. So now I meet with them all, and we're all looking at this issue collectively.
Tony, what's your thoughts on the list here?
I think the 1 and 2 are you can't have one without the other. I think, number 1 causes number 2. And what I mean by that is these folks that are doing these things are increasingly becoming more and more smart in how they attempt to gain entrance to our network. I mean, in any given month in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we have over 40 million attempts of intrusions that we know about. That's a mind-boggling number. Think about it for a while. Multiply it by 12. So, I mean, we have a sharp CISO. We have a sharp organization that deals with this problem. However, there's not enough money to do everything we need to do that we think we need to do to try to mitigate this problem. So, we do the best we can. In fact, during the fiscal year 14-15 budget year, I didn't fund any projects for any of my bureaus except for security. I took every dime that I could scrape up and gave it to the Chief Information Security Officer and said, implement these solutions, implement these projects to help us mitigate this risk, whether it's from DLP protection, whether it's EGRC, which is where we hook into our SIM to actively look at monitoring the network. And we're also looking at big data analytics, where we're actually going to look at the logs and looking at the packet level of really what's changing within the packet level of communications on the network. That's the stuff we need to get to. That's the stuff we need to start doing, because if we don't do that, we're really falling behind the power curve.
And to add a little more sunshine to this discussion, with all of this, both of these gentlemen will tell you a significant challenge is the ability to recruit and retain cybersecurity professionals. So as the federal government ramps up, as private sector ramps up, state and local are sitting at the end of the food chain. And I know they both experienced a lot of turnover. Certainly their public sector chief security folks could double their salary and go to the private sector. And we've seen this over and over again. And so that number 3 slot about the adequacy of cybersecurity professionals is particularly critical, because, again, they're bound by some of the salary issues and some of the attractiveness of moving off into the private sector. So we've seen that as evidence of one of the challenges. So you see that as over half the CEOs said that was a major barrier. So I know neither of you guys pay market rate and lots of money. Have no problem retaining those people, right?
I actually had a conversation with our governor about this in December, and I wanted him to know that the pay rate or the pay range that we pay our cybersecurity team is way below the market. And he understood that, but I said, I just want you to know, we are very fortunate that we have the team that we have and what they're doing to protect the data of the state of Delaware. And so I wanted him to really know we got some really good people that could really jump ship and double or triple their salaries, but they're staying and they like what they do. But I don't know if that's going to last forever. I hope it lasts as long as I'm there. But the other thing that I just want to touch on, and it's really these emerging technologies. And so I know maybe a number of you may be vendors, and we get inundated with all kinds of different vendors about all these new technologies that will stop these threats. But it's real important that you kind of simplify and understand kind of what we're faced with, because I get bombarded with vendors. This tool is the next best thing to slice bread, or this tool is going to stop everything. And the tools are getting more sophisticated, but some of my people are not, their skill set isn't growing as fast as some of the tools, sophistication of the tools. And so we kind of we need to work together, the state governments and the private sector with the vendor community to kind of make sure we have the right tool set to protect the right things.
Good. Let me jump to another topic. So we got a lot of C topics here, as you saw, with not only TION, but also got cybersecurity, consolidation, and cloud. So we're going to kind of touch on consolidation, and you can see some of my comments here about this is not new. It's been going on for a couple of decades in state government. We had state governments doing data center consolidation 20 years ago. However, it certainly ratcheted up in terms of the primary focus to address budget and control operational cost during the recession. It was probably the major strategic approach for almost every state CIO, is to consolidate, to rationalize, optimize, kind of reduce the number and diversity, complexity of their environment. A lot of that focused on data center consolidation, server consolidation, and everything else. So you can see some of the business rationale behind that in terms of both the facilities and services, and even to the people. We've seen a number of states that have done a major reduction in that area. So again, with knowing that that has been a top priority for state CIOs for a number of years, we focused a few questions on that. So we're going to kind of move to kind of some of the hard data from our 13 survey, get some perspectives from our guest panelists up here about the status of their consolidation, and then we'll kind of jump into a related topic, which certainly the adoption of cloud and SaaS. So Tony, let me go with you in terms of Pennsylvania is a state that's been moving in a consolidated way, an enterprise vision for a long time. So kind of, I guess, pick out a couple of these. If you look at the 2013 data, you see, some pretty significant a movement in a number of these areas where the state CIOs have said they're done consolidating in a number of areas. So maybe highlight a couple of your success stories in that space.
I mean, I just went and checked the ball. I mean,
Yeah.
Everything below, from data center on, we've done enterprise consolidation from a service perspective. And Pennsylvania's been doing that for a lot longer than I've been there. And we're just picking up the ball and taking it and running with it and continuing that process. We have a lot of enterprise services from, Exchange. We were one of the first states to actually consolidate multiple email systems into one flavor of Exchange back in 2002. We are on Exchange 2007, servicing 90,000 employees with one active directory domain, pa.gov. Everybody in the state of Pennsylvania, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania employee has a pa.gov domain name. That is something that has proved huge dividends in other things that we've done beyond email, from automated user provisioning, integration with ERP. A lot of things that we've done from an enterprise perspective. Really, the foundation is email, if you believe it. If you believe it. We've consolidated so much. We're actually going to consolidate data centers from a data center perspective, is that we're no longer going to even own data centers. We're actually going to go and buy compute as a commodity, as a utility, from the contract we just awarded with Unisys. I feel, and this is my opinion, that state government should not be in the business of owning infrastructure. You just can't afford it. You can't afford the technical refresh from the infrastructure standpoint, and you definitely can't afford to maintain those data centers as they should be for the critical data that's contained in those data centers. Let the professionals do that and buy it as a commodity. So that's the direction that Pennsylvania will be going.
Very good, and we'll delve into email here in a moment. But Jim, again, you've also in Delaware have a kind of a historical track record of consolidation and labor services. So can highlight a few
Sure.
of your items here.
We've had consolidated email for 14 years. So, you know, we're one of the first states to actually have one email system for all the branches of government. So that's a pretty big deal. We've had an IT consolidation effort program. We started back in 2010, so we've had it for almost 4 years. We're saving about $4 million a year. We've consolidated 10 out of 14 departments with our departments in terms of their IT staff. We've consolidated 4 data centers. So we used to have 9, now we're down to 5, and we eventually want to get down to 2. The big thing that we're kind of, you know, IT consolidation does improve your overall operation, makes you more efficient. But the one thing that we're seeing is really risk mitigation. We had a tough budget year we've had many tough budget years over the past 4 or 5 years. And a number of our agency partners have deferred maintenance on equipment and also upgrading of various applications. So now all of a sudden that the economy's turning around and the state budget is turning around, we're seeing, oh, this has been in need of an upgrade for, you know, the last 5 or 6 years. Can you help us? And so we're having to help them and also, in some cases, help finance the upgrade of certain large-scale legacy solutions. And so consolidation is a great thing, but we really see it as a risk mitigation tool also.
Yeah, let me add a little bit of a disclaimer here, too. Your mileage may vary. These two do not represent the rank and file of all states because they are, as I tell everybody, one size does not fit all. So again, they represent a pretty high level of maturity and advancement as vis-a-vis a lot of other states. But certainly I think it's a good perspective. But the states are really in a wide variety from highly decentralized all the way up to highly decentralized where the CIO organization has all infrastructure, has all the IT budget, and actually has all the employees reporting to them. So again, they're a little bit, again, higher order of maturity than you're going to see across the board. Let me focus on one area because we did a more deeper investigation of this because we've had a lot of requests from our state CIO community about more details on email as being kind of the prime target of consolidation of a service. And of course, so what we're seeing, of course, is a jump in terms of what states are doing where they would have done the multi-agency email environment to a consolidated platform, perhaps in one of the 2 or 3 major platform providers. That would have been an on-premise solution running several thousand inboxes for all state agencies. And now we're seeing states actually jump right over that into cloud offerings, whether it's on-premise or whether it's third-party hosted cloud. And so that's been kind of the big battleground here over the past couple of years. So one of the questions we ask the CIOs that is get a little more deeper is where they are in that space. And you can see from this chart data that, again, almost half the states, I'd say this is from April 2013, so we've moved probably beyond that now to where half the states where their email consolidation is done. And by that I mean, you know, N of 1 for the executive branch. Jim's unique in that he's got other branches of government. Some states are bringing in other agencies. Some actually are offering their services as a cloud offering to local governments and other jurisdictions. So again, there's hybrids going on out there. But you can see that with the exception of one state with their cancel project, which happened in 2013, all the states are pursuing email. I suspect that is top of the list for a number of CIOs. So you've already heard that both these guys, they've had a consolidated mail environment for a long time. What we're going to see next is, again, the jump to cloud offerings. So I guess I'm going to just focus on that as we move to the next topic, and I'll follow up on the email side. But again, back to the cloud, let's look at the next C, which is, again, an interest, I think, of a lot of folks, is where states are with cloud services. So we have longitudinal data since 2010 where we've been asking CIOs the same question, which is what's the status, your state's status regarding cloud services, kind of in this framework, in this rubric of these same questions. And we have a little shift all the time because, again, go back to my original opening remarks about the changes in state CIOs. When you've got 30 new ones answering the same kind of questions, they have a different lens, a different perspective on that. So we do see some changes, but I think what I will tell you about is the second question about the state has some applications in the cloud, it's continuing others. We're seeing more than double-digit increases every year in that since 2010. So that's been continued to grow. You can see 68+% investigating cloud, about a quarter of our respondents. But I would tell you that every state right now, with the exception of one, is really invested in cloud. Some are heavily invested, and most of those are private clouds for now, but we're seeing a lot of interesting developments and hybrids, and then, of course, moving to some states considering public cloud services for the storage of public data, GIS data and other things. So I'm going to, you've heard Tony talk about, I'm going to get him a little more detail about his cloud compute services, but I want to go back to Jim and kind of say, Jim, give your kind of characterization of where Delaware is in cloud today, and then we'll kind of ask a follow-up question on the acquisition side.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to report that we have a private cloud. We've had it in place since 2010, and we have 83% of all of our physical servers in this private cloud. And we have one of the highest percentages in the United States in terms of virtualization in that private cloud. Over the last 3 years or so, we have probably implemented or deployed close to 100 software as a service cloud solutions. So when I first got there in 2009, we probably had 6 applications in the cloud. Now we have about 100, almost 100 in the cloud, 110 applications in the cloud. So we have a cloud-first policy. So any agency that has the remaining physical servers, they have to talk to us, and we'll try to get the remaining physical servers into our private cloud. I'm a big advocate of cloud computing from a software as a service standpoint. I think it's the best thing for the state. And so this is something I've really personally have been pushing throughout the state government.
Tony, you referenced your major cloud transition and the fact that you hope not to see any servers and mainframes or anything else in your environment.
Well, I mean, yeah, we currently don't, I mean, Pennsylvania's been, I mean, we've been procuring cloud service before cloud service was actually a term within the IT community.
Yeah, when they called it the mainframe?
Yeah. Back in the early 2000s, the Commonwealth consolidated 17 mainframe platforms into one organization, which was Unisys, which is called the Data Powerhouse. Don't know if you're familiar with that. But that's a private cloud where we didn't own any of the infrastructure, and the agencies managed the mainframe applications, and Unisys managed the platform itself. The batch loading and those type of things. So we've been in a private cloud environment for a very long time. My enterprise data center officers offered private cloud services, from email to portal to SharePoint services to credit card transaction services, a multitude of other things for Commonwealth agencies. So what we're doing now is we're stepping it up. We're going to actually go to the next level, and I think we're the only first state to even try to do this. Is private cloud is great, and you're going to save some money, but we need to save more money. And we need to, how to do that is go to the public cloud and move everything to the public cloud. And how you save money is the economy of scale is so much greater when a vendor can actually spread those costs amongst other customers besides yourself. So that's what this compute services contract is going to do. It's going to encompass the mainframe, it's going to encompass the client servers, it's got managed services for application services, it's got a multitude of things from a catalog perspective that agencies are going to be able to procure in the cloud. We will no longer, again, like I said before, no longer invest in infrastructure and storage and the people to manage that as we did before, traditionally not doing traditional IT. That's the direction Pennsylvania's doing, and I'm looking forward to the next 18 months to make sure to get this thing completed.
So watch the headlines. This is certainly a major project and a major transition, and certainly seeing states. This is a great example of that innovative space. Tony knows that the average tenure for a state CIO is 26 months. So he's hoping to survive this major project transformation. But to that point, let me move to our next question, which is there's certainly for the states and have been some significant barriers to cloud acquisition and cloud adoption. Security was one of them. Obviously, there's data issues, there's legal and jurisdictional issues, but one has simply been the nature of the procurement, as you heard Tony reference the challenges around state IT procurement. And this is a challenge not only with the procurement officials, but also certainly budget officials officials, other state leaders, legislators, is getting to understand that the future space, the future kind of to-be state, is around services and not system-centric. So as I tell people, they're particularly in the procurement and budget space, they're comfortable with the green blinking lights being owned by the state and being closed up in a cage in a box in the data center, and that makes them comfortable. They're asset acquisition kind of driven, and now we're kind of transforming that paradigm and moving to one where the state's going to do a lot of steering and a lot less rowing with all of the stuff. And we're seeing this, all across the state. So one of those is around how do you procure these things? And again, you'll notice from the question is that we still have a significant part, 75% of the states that are in that kind of, we're developing templates, but we're interested in development. That's something we're working on right now within NASCIO, is kind of those checklist of issues. But let me go to Tony here in terms of your response. This is an area that a lot of CIOs are interested in terms of how do you develop. Do you have specific contract vehicles for cloud, or you use just what you've already got on the shelf?
Well, a lot of the big issues when it comes to cloud services in the procurement process is really getting the terms and conditions agreed to by both parties, both the state and the vendor. And if you do that on a one-by-one basis, it's very painful. So what we've done in Pennsylvania is we have a couple of contract vehicles. One of them is called the Invitation to Qualify, which has cloud services as a category that have specific cloud services or T's and C's that are already pre-mandated by the vendors, and the vendors, in order to participate in that program, have to agree to those T's and C's. So that really makes the procurement process simplified. That contract vehicle is really efficient in getting services, but it's not something we can use to buy a $1 billion contract, which is what this compute service is. You go the old standard RFP process, which in itself is very, very, very difficult. Just to put it in perspective, we awarded that contract December of 2013. We started the RFP process in the summer of 2010. It took that long to get everything done. Dotting your I's and crossing your T's and making sure everything is associated, and we still have a protest. So it's very difficult. So it takes time. It takes time, and you have to plan. And unfortunately, as Doug says, the tenure of a CIO in state government is 26 months. I'm hoping to go beyond that, because we do have still things that I want to finish before we move on. Because Jim and both know this is a temporary job, and we know that. But hopefully it's a temporary job that lasts 8 years. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, sometimes the governors have different perspective on that. Yeah. Jim, I know you mentioned how much you have invested in the cloud, and certainly working with your private solution providers, you've got to come up with either of those T's and C's. So, but let's hear your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, back in the beginning of 2011, this was my #1 pain point. I was trying to acquire Salesforce licenses, and we did not have a contract vehicle to purchase those licenses. It was the most frustrating thing for about 6 months. Our procurement laws have not kept pace with the changes in technology, specifically related to acquiring SaaS solutions. And so I had these ongoing little fights with our budget director and our procurement people, because they didn't get it. And so it took a lot of education and awareness for them to understand, finally, this is the direction that technology is actually moving into in terms of these platforms. And so we came up with a framework of terms and conditions, and we've had that in place since about June of 2011. And so we've been using it to vet all of our cloud solutions, the software as a service solutions, and it's worked out for us very, very well. And we've been sharing that particular template with other states all across the country. So we feel really good about where we are. And so we want to take that to the next level in terms of expanding it for platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, and also software as a service solutions that only use public data. So we're still evolving it, but we're maturing very, very quickly in terms of our terms and conditions and our templates.
Okay, good, Jim. All right, well, we're in Final Jeopardy. And Alex, I'm going to take mobility for 1,000. So this will be our kind of final set of questions. Again, another key topic, and certainly great opportunities, fraught with some challenges, and I'm going to kind of get some perspective. So This is something that we've always done a little work on, and we see some, again, great, tremendous advantages to states where future of government will be really delivered to people at a kind of a piece of glass in their hand or on a tablet, and also the workforce. So we're seeing great opportunities for the state IT workforce and delivery of services. So we asked our CIOs within their strategic agenda and operational plans where they would characterize that, and you can see, I think, from the data without me going through it, that again, it's either essential or very high priority. So a significant percentage of our CIOs see this as key. So I guess I'll kind of move on from that space, because I know with both these guys that is probably their response. But let's talk about more critically. That's good from a strategic perspective, but how do you operationalize that in terms of managing mobility? So let's look at one which can be a little more vexing, and you can see the data hasn't changed too much. So this is part of the challenges of the fact that we don't have states, for the most part, that have a real strong enterprise portfolio around mobility. It's relatively emerging. High adoption, very, very quickly came into state government. So they're dealing with the multitude of both internal and external issues. So I'm going to go, I guess, I'll get with Jim here, and then we'll move to some questions. But Jim, your thoughts on how your state's managing mobility. Is it mostly coordinated? Is it somewhat coordinated? How would you characterize that?
It's really fragmented, Doug. We have pockets of agencies that are developing their own apps with third-party providers. We've developed a couple of apps for other agencies, and so there's this kind of shift between internal apps for the workers, for them to go out and perform their inspections or whatever they do, but also creating more mobile apps for the consumers or the actual taxpayers. And so we just don't have a central focus where we're kind of working all together. We kind of got different people doing their own thing. We're really trying to make sure we're only building applications on 1 or 2 different platforms versus 3 or 4 different mobile app platforms. So this is something that's been a frustration of mine. We have some people that really are gung-ho and really want to push more mobile apps out to their constituents, and then we have some agencies and cabinet secretaries, they don't care. So it's a little frustrating, but I think eventually we'll get there where we're having more of a consolidated view and strategy.
Okay. Tony, last words on mobility.
Sure. I mean, it's here to stay, and we got to deal with it. And as Jim said, I mean, agencies are going on, trying to figure out how they're going to provide mobile apps for not only their employees but their constituents, the citizens. So we've taken the approach of we've developed a mobile strategy first perspective from an application development perspective, and we've got a process in place from an enterprise level that kind of dictates, okay, you need to look at, do you really need to go mobile? Is this something you really need to do? Because that's the decision of the agency, and that's the decision of the business. I'm not going to tell you yes or no that you need to develop a mobile app, but I will tell you that you need to develop in accordance with standards and security processes and make sure that that application is secure. Priority, I mean, the preference is that they do it in a responsive design fashion with HTML versus going to a native app, because that in itself provides some problems. Specifically in the Apple environment. But again, we wrap enterprise governance around it. But again, it's left up to the agency to dictate from a business standpoint what they need to do mobile with or not.
Quick follow-up to that, because it kind of ties into the workforce issues. In the native mobile app, do you have any native mobile app developers or skill sets within state government?
There's pockets, and I think a lot of the folks that are traditionally .NET developers are moving in, their agencies are getting those folks trained to develop, whether it's in the iOS platform or the Android platform.
Jim, you have anybody on staff?
We do have some people on staff, but we've really been leveraging NIC to create a lot of our mobile apps. We're an NIC state. But we have other vendors that are coming in and approaching us and saying, we created this for this state, and this state. We can do it in Delaware in 6 weeks. And then the cabinet secretary says, oh, yeah, I want that. Yeah. So it's, like I said, it's all over the board.
Yeah, so we've got security, we've got architecture considerations, as Tony said, states struggling with whether they go native, whether they go HTML, and they're looking at HTML5 and kind of a responsive design, or whether they're going to do both. And so states are struggling with that, but I will tell you that I only know of probably this many states, or probably less, that actually have mobile app developers that are actually trained, that are on staff. So you're leveraging third-party providers and solution providers for almost all of that, because again, it's very difficult. It's a very hot workforce skill and very difficult for states to attract and retain. They can reskill and retrain, but very difficult to bring those folks into the state government.
And this being a public safety conference, is
Yeah.
everybody familiar with Pennsylvania's JNet?
Yeah.
Well, be looking for some mobile apps in your store soon to access JNet from a mobile phone.
And if you're interested in all of the mobile apps across the states, I'll do a kind of a blatant product placement is go to NASCIO's mobile app store. So we have a catalog, a repository of all of the mobile apps that can be identified on all the native mobile apps on the three major platforms. So you can go state by state or search by category. So if you're kind of interested if you're just interesting purposes, what's out there and who's doing what, these folks all have apps in the catalog. You can search a variety of different ways. So with that, we are closely being out of time. So we've got time for one or two questions. We don't have time for any questions. That's good, because these guys probably already questioned out. So anyway, appreciate your kind attention this morning and appreciate the time. Thank you.